Hello and welcome to another edition of It's About Money. I'm Nanette Nocon. Thanks for joining us. Today we're going to talk about the investor emotions in these wild market conditions. These days it's not so much do you have the tolerance for the risk in the market, it's more like on a risk of 1 to 10, are you an 11 or a 12? It's been a very, very difficult time for investors. And here with us today is the Executive Vice President from AM&M Financial Services, Tony Gugino, to help us sort out some of these emotions that we're going through. Thank you so much, Tony, for joining us. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome, Nanette, and thank you for the opportunity.
You know, the stock market has taken investors for a wild ride from 1998 to present, the up and then the down. What are some of the emotions, of course the censored ones, that investors have expressed over the past decade?
Nanette, I like to just say that we see clients come to us that I call it the wildest roller coaster ride they've ever been in their lives. There's been just, as the market was heading up, more and more investors were questioning their advisor, saying, why are we hiring you? Why are we paying you? We could all do this on ourselves. And they got caught on the technology bandwagon and the dot-coms. And they rode it up and hit the bubble and rode it right down. We've seen, unfortunately, marriages broken, a lot of relationships just broken down since one of the spouses were mainly in charge of taking care of the investments for the family and never really discussing it with the other spouse. And when that bubble broke, their lifestyle changed dramatically. So there's been a lot of harm that occurred in this past bear market.
Sure, it's been terrible. You know, one of the things, I think it blindsided a lot of people.
Yes, it did.
Yeah, it almost felt like it continued to ride up and it would never stop.
It would never stop, and we would have people call and say, if you can't, I kept this one email, if you can't guarantee, and the word was guarantee, a 35% annual return, I'm going to have to look for another advisor.
Oh my gosh, good luck.
Good, exactly.
Who are they fooling? You know, I read a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, and it said that employee assistance programs these days have more issues that they're dealing with from employees with regard to the stock market performance, more than any other issue. What's your perspective on that trend?
We're seeing more and more companies offer to the masses, to the employees, an hour or 2 hours of company will pay for the benefit that they'll be able to meet with their advisor. And we feel that's really good for the corporation because the emotions that are tied up with the investors and really their dreams have fallen apart. And they need to discuss that with their advisor, get it out of their system. So I've seen that very positive in corporate America.
Yeah, I think you're right. It is good for the employer, good for the employee. I think one of the diseases that people caught in the late 90s is that many people were playing with their 401k plans. You know, clearly not a financial planning strategy.
Yes, we've seen, you know, Red, we've seen even locally, you know, we always hear about the Enrons, but unfortunately we have so many great people that worked at Rochester Tel. They were bought out by Global Crossing, and they were just devastated in their 401k plans.
Sure.
So there's been a lot of government changes and not having the employer put the contributions in the employer stock any longer. So there's been a lot of unfortunate things that have occurred, but good things usually come after bad things. So we're seeing changes in the government regulations.
Yeah, I think it's great. The pendulum is swinging. And of course, in some cases, we're seeing that it's kind of swinging to the other extreme. So at some point,
yes,
probably find the middle ground.
Hopefully we'll find the middle ground soon.
Yeah, that's right. Now, we've always heard, you know, a simple thing, cocktail party deal, you know, buy low, sell high. It sounds so simple. I mean, buy low, sell high. How do investors fare with this simple rule?
I wish it was that easy, that we could just say to anyone, even ourselves, buy low, sell high. Unfortunately, we never know when to pull that trigger. We are more of a disciplined firm where we like to have clients just dollar cost average and look at their total financial plan, see what is needed, and then invest for long term. We believe in asset allocation, rebalancing, do not have any be concentrated in one industry, and really get down to basics.
Sure. Actually, let's talk about some of those basics, Tony, because it's probably new to some of our viewers. Asset allocation, we talked about that. Let's discuss the concept of asset allocation. What is that about?
Well, in reality, asset allocation is really investing in all broad markets, bonds, both U.S. and foreign, stocks, international, domestic, mid-cap, large cap, small cap stocks, real estate, and other, there's other investment opportunities that are out there for a small portion of the portfolio. There might be commodities, futures, venture capital, but in the past, in the late 90s, when this boom was just going up, up, and up, people felt they were diversifying if they had more than one technology company. and that's the unfortunate thing that occurred to a lot of wealth.
Yes.
People were afraid to sell and take capital gains. We were banging our head against the desk, begging clients to sell, where they picked one or two stocks. They were very fortunate, made a lot of money. I'll use the word made. They didn't sell, so they had it. Mm-hmm. And then unfortunately, when that bubble occurred, they lost it all. And they think back on how much they had, mm-hmm. and they're devastated, where I try to go back to them now and saying, you know, those were paper profits. Those were really not real values. If you sold them, that would have been great, mm-hmm. but you didn't. Mm-hmm. You're still ahead of the game. Mm-hmm. Let's move forward.
Sure, absolutely. As long as people stuck to, you know, the principles of asset
yes.
allocation. And, you know, that's the interesting thing. Most investors, you know, don't want to invest in an asset class that is doing poorly. And, you know, and that's really what the savior will be of the portfolio when
yes.
the trends change.
Yes. I like to use an analogy of, most of us might have gardens at our home, and we harvest our gardens. You're harvesting the fruit to allow new fruit to replenish itself. Mm-hmm. And that's really what asset allocation is all about. By keeping within the allocation, you're selling high, buying low, what we're supposed to do, but a lot of times we don't like to sell our winners, we sell our losers.
Right, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of sad when stock is falling, people feel that they'd be bankrupt, you know, even the most profitable companies,
yeah.
You know, so it's unfortunate. You know, interestingly enough, I had some clients that had Rochester telephone stocks, you had mentioned that, and as the market was taking it up when it became Global Crossing, I had encouraged some clients to diversify, but then I would get calls from accountants at tax time, you know, in 1999 and 2000, you're creating such a tax gain for these clients, what are you doing?
Right.
So yeah, it's the issue of, do you accept paying taxes and diversify, or do you accept the risk of losing the profits?
I always love to write it on paper, showing clients that, you know, even if we're in the highest, well, even if you're in the highest tax bracket, as long as it's a long term held over a year, it's only taxed at 20%, and if you're in New York State, you're close to a 6% tax. You're still keeping quite a bit of that.
Mm-hmm. Sure, absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. So it's not like you're giving up all the gains.
Yeah, it's funny in how they want to sell those positions now.
Yeah, that's right. I know, for the losses. That's right. Actually, I always tell people it's okay to pay taxes because that means you're making money. And exactly. The problem of not paying taxes could mean that you're not making any money at all, and that could be even worse.
Yeah. I stop them when I say that the best thing I can do for you is to have you in the highest tax bracket throughout your retirement. Uh-huh. That means you have a lot of income coming in.
Sure, sure. Yeah. That's an excellent problem. So we talked about asset allocation, and that's putting money in different asset classes, value, growth, large cap, mid cap, and so on. And then you talked about harvesting, and that's kind of rebalancing the portfolio, mm-hmm. right? So when one's going up, one category is going up, need to harvest that and put it in another category that's falling.
Yes.
So,
yeah.
Okay,
it's very interesting. It's very simple to do, but emotions get in the way, and that's where their advisor comes into play, because the advisor tries to take the emotions out of the picture, and we set targets and we do our rebalancing on a quarterly basis. Mm-hmm. Most individuals can't because the emotions get in the way. So that's where a great advisor-client relationship can come into play.
Sure. And if people are busy in their own lives, they may not take those checkpoints to take a look at their portfolio to rebalance. Right. Excellent. Now, how do you think the emotions impact our behavior towards investing? I mean, people fall in love with their investments? I mean...
Probably like we were just talking about, people love to talk about their winners around a cocktail table, dinner, whatever, but you always have to look, I believe in looking at a financial plan at your end results. What's your goals? Where do you want to achieve in life? Mm-hmm. And once that position starts to become a very concentrated position, too many things have occurred in the past. And I would rather take some money off the table, reallocate it to the rest of the portfolio, and not be surprised. Clients and advisors don't like surprises on the downside.
Sure, so it's better to plan ahead.
Plan ahead.
Right, and actually you brought an interesting point, which many people have taken advantage of. I think that there are more people approaching financial advisors these days because they're desperate. They don't know what to do. And you're right about that. If you have a financial plan and you know what it takes to meet your objective, less emotions will be attached to the money as such.
I believe that's the case. We do that quite a bit where you and I, as we're doing retirement analysis for clients, and we'll project 30, 40 years out, hopefully with good life expectations and so forth. We'll just go back to those plans and say, Mr. and Mrs. Client, this is where we thought you would be, we're there now. So get out of being sad that you might have lost that market high in the year 2000, 2001, and we're right on target. So that, I think, helps get the client back on track and it allows them to smell the roses again.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. Now, is it really enough that we rely on historical trends? I mean, when should investors call it quits? I mean, I've got people telling me, I don't want to have my money go to nothing. And it's okay. We look at all the large company stocks. Do we really think that IBM, Walmart, Microsoft, all those companies would go to nothing? I mean,
Ford Motor, General Electric, all, and unfortunately companies locally that, we've been so blessed in Rochester, really not feeling a lot of the recessionary times in the past, and now all of a sudden it seems like all of our local companies are hurting. But if we look back at the past 75 years or so, our grandparents and our parents, they've faced the same challenges along. There's been times when they've had their own crises around the world. We've been very fortunate in the U.S. We've overcome those and we've moved forward. And it's the same thing here. There's no question that we're facing some very difficult situations with the war currently and terrorism. But we as investors, we need to stay focused, and whatever the allocation that we have towards equities or towards bonds, as long as we keep within that allocation and realizing that it's long-term money, we'll meet our goals.
Sure. I actually agree with that. I mean, as an immigrant to the United States, I mean, one of the things I appreciate, this country is really based on free enterprise. And as long as free enterprise exists, people will find a way to make money. And that's what corporations do. They're in existence to make money. I mean, they just won't watch their companies whittle down to nothing, And then, of course, you've got people saying, investors saying, gee, the corporate world is full of scandals. I mean, everybody's scandalous. But they're forgetting that scandals exist all the time. I mean, just 10 years ago with the formation of...
I think because unfortunately, as of today, we're heading towards 4 years of market declines. People are putting their heads into the sand, and they don't want to know anything, and they feel that if they keep their money in bonds, everything will be fine. Unfortunately, our biggest concern at our firm is for those clients. Once inflation starts to tick up and interest rates increase, bond prices are going to decline, and those clients are going to have a double whammy on their hand. They're going to suffer the losses they faced in the equity markets, and they'll have new losses to look forward to when the bonds decline.
Yeah. Isn't that an excellent example of people, instead of buying low, selling high, they're buying high and going to sell low.
Right.
I mean, I've seen people move investments from bonds in 1998, 99, when bonds didn't perform so well and stocks were moving up. Buying stocks at the peak, selling the stocks in 2001 and 2002, buying bonds when it's at the highest. And guess what they'll do next, right?
We had so many retirees in their late 60s, mid 70s come to us in the late 90s saying that there's no place in my portfolio for bonds any longer. We should have 100% equity. And that kind of threw us a couple steps back, saying, why would you want to take on so much extra risk? well, there's quote unquote no risk because this is a new economy. Your firm might be old and you don't understand what's really occurring out there.
Sure.
So it's really our job to hold that client's hand through the good times and the bad times.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And just help them see that this is not a forever type of trend. It will cycle in and out, even through the Great Depression, the recession of the 70s, you know, all that stuff. Now, help us with advice on how to deal with these emotions. I mean, you can see a financial advisor, but how can people, they hear the stock market reports daily. How can people gain control of what they're going through?
That's an excellent question. And you think where we are today, and even just 10 years ago, where technology is. You know, we're getting news now in our fingertips on the second. Mm-hmm. So more and more folks are seeing, not just waiting until they get home at night to catch the news. They're live, they're on it. And what occurs is once emotions enter our thought process, usually we make the wrong decisions. Mm-hmm. So we keep going back to a client and stress diversification and asset allocated portfolio, have it rebalanced ongoingly, and meet with your advisor. Have your advisor understand what your goals are in life, and then meet to make sure that you're going forward. And there's so much that life has to offer. You should not have to worry about that on a day-to-day basis. You should have a team of professionals around you to help you get to the end goal.
Sure, absolutely. And also I think it's important to understand what kind of investments people have. When they talk about XYZ mutual fund, it seems so far removed. So they need to understand what kind of stocks are held within the mutual funds. Yes. And really say, gee, I'm a Coca-Cola drinker, and have people stop drinking Coca-Cola? You know, I mean, those kinds of questions. Have people stop buying appliances from GE? You know, things like that. So bring it to more practical terms.
And we need to do that. And not mentioning any names of mutual funds, but in the late 90s, the go-go's of the 90s, mm-hmm. There were quite a few very famous funds out there that probably the top 10 stocks had 40 to 50% of the whole portfolio. So they were very concentrated, and the clients didn't realize it.
Yeah, you're right, and they didn't know that was too much of a weighting in one category. So
right.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was it's interesting because portfolio managers even got caught up in some of these. Not all of them, thank goodness, just a handful of them. So, so that's really good. Now, many investors get free advice from radio. I can't really mention names when I think about it, but you get here some influential national figures and so on sharing advice to investors. How does that impact individual investors and their portfolio? What are your thoughts on that?
There are a lot of great talk shows that are out there, mm-hmm. and I think it's great for the investors. But those shows are really meant to entertain the masses. We are all individuals with different needs, different family needs, goals, and so forth. So I look at those conversations, those shows, as a starting point to meet with your advisor, mm-hmm. and then have it brought back to, I'll use the word home. How does it affect my family? How can I use this advice with my advisor's assistance and help me reach the goals that my family are looking for?
So there really ought to be thought-provoking as opposed to an action-oriented.
Exactly.
Advice, right, yeah. You're right, because sometimes people don't think about it, or what they're talking about on the radio or on the TV or even a show like this, it makes people think about situations in a different light and perhaps encourage them to seek out the advice of an advisor. Yeah.
We have seen time and time again where people might listen to these shows and they might just, there might be something that just jars them emotionally, that they sell a position mm-hmm. without talking to their investment advisor or tax advisor. Mm-hmm. Lo and behold, they created a huge tax liability that might not have been needed. Mm-hmm. So it's important to remember that those shows are for the masses, mm-hmm. and it might not meet your specific needs.
Sure. Okay. And really, like you said, that's one step. Take it further. Now, how can financial advisors be of help to investors? I mean, we know the good advisors call the clients on a regular basis, those kinds of things. But what if an investor has not heard from their advisor? What is the proper thing to do, and what should they be doing?
Those are always tough, because we look at our industry, and in the go-go 90s, everybody was entering our field because it was the in-field to be in. Mm-hmm. The past 4 years have really shown, the advisors that are going to stick it out and stay. Mm-hmm. If I guess I would think about this as, if I did not hear from my advisor for quite some time, I probably would call, give that person a chance, and if I wasn't satisfied at that point, I'd be looking around. Mm-hmm. I'd probably ask friends and family if they're satisfied with the people that they're currently working with.
Sure. That need that contact.
That need the contact.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Now, it's almost like, it's almost like a personal coach your advisor should be.
Sure.
And the rapport with your advisor is very, very important. Mm-hmm.
Actually, that is so true, because if you cannot open the lines of communication, then it's very difficult to work with each other over time.
Correct.
I mean, that's so basic, but it's so important. Mm-hmm. Now, what is the practical approach that investors can take in light of the fact that many investors have to reconfigure the way they're looking at retirement? Maybe a lot of people are thinking, I'm going to retire at 50, 55, and now they're approaching that, and the market's not quite where they want to. What's...
We look at our parents and grandparents. They worked until they're at least 65 or longer just to make ends meet. Mm-hmm. And it really I was really intrigued over the past few years where clients thought it was their well, we all have goals, but mm-hmm. it was their wishes that they would like to retire at 50. And it's interesting because we're living longer, so we have to make sure we have a nest egg to last the next 40, 45 years. We're doing retirement analyses showing people live to their mid-90s.
Sure.
You need to have a large nest egg to keep that lifestyle going as inflation occurs on an annual basis. What we have really seen here is, by this devastation in the markets over the past 3 years, I mentioned it earlier, people have their head in the sand. Mm-hmm. We need to really move forward, look at our goals, and get back on track and smell the roses. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. Interesting point you mentioned, people need to have their money last them 40, 45 years. Interestingly enough, most investors didn't really think about investing until maybe in their 30s. So they save for 20 years, but they expect the portfolio to give them income for 40 years. I mean, something's kind of lopsided about that, and most people aren't really saving, beyond 10, 15% of their income. In many cases, very small amount. So really, beyond life expectancy, we ought to look at the balance of it. How long are we saving for, and how long do we expect the portfolio to give us the income?
Right. So we always hear clients say, well, we need to live for today, and that's so true. We don't know what our time is on this earth. But the same token, if we do have good health and good fortunes, we don't want to see our clients out in the streets in their 90s.
Sure, you're absolutely right, and we don't know. I always tell people, my father passed away when he was 36, but my great-grandfather lived to 104. So I don't know where I'm going to fall on the scale, but I better be prepared in both scenarios.
Right.
You're right. I mean, who knows what tomorrow will bring, but just in case we're around for another 50, 60 years, better make sure that we have assets to, take care of us.
And another thing that it's current is, I like to use the word sleep factor. Okay. 2 words. I tell it to every client. And what they have experienced over the past 3 years, we have to make sure moving forward that doesn't occur again. A lot of clients lost a lot of sleep, and they saw their dreams just dwindle in front of them as the markets continued to decline, especially for the clients that really do-it-yourselfers that they really got caught onto this .com craze.
Sure.
So we have to assess where we are today, take inventory, and then move forward. What do we need to do to get to those dreams? We might not get to the ultimate dream, but we'll get to the end result.
And funny thing too is that studies have shown that the longer we work, or at least keep our minds active, the less incidence of Alzheimer's. So I tell people, make sure you stay busy, even work part-time, read a lot, whatever. So it could be a good thing. We don't want to live too long without our faculties, mental faculties anyway. Now, in closing, what any words of wisdom? What's the light at the end of the tunnel for everyone?
We're very fortunate to be where we are in Rochester. There's a lot of exciting things that are occurring with technology and medical center and so forth, that I think we're going to have a lot of exciting things occurring over the next 5 to 10 years. But it's really, we have to get back to basics. We can't expect, as I mentioned that one email, I need to have a 35% rate of return. We need to get back to just the basics and save on a weekly basis.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Important. It's really what you save rather than the rate of return that's really critical here.
Exactly.
That's excellent. And as everything, it goes up, it goes down, just go with the ride and
stay the course in a well-diversed portfolio.
Excellent. That is great. Well, Tony, I really appreciate you sharing the time with us and going through this. I mean, investors are just like, they're wigged out. Don't know what to do. And hope you were able to find some advice or some guidelines for you to follow from our conversation with Tony Gugino from AM&M Financial Services. He's an Executive Vice President there. Tony, thank you so much for joining us.
Have a nice day.
Thank you. And thank you, our viewers, for joining us. If you have any questions or comments, please email me at nnocon@aol.com. And until next time, so long.